I'd like to ask everybody to silence their phones. Now, I'd like the board members sitting on the stage to introduce themselves, beginning on my right.
I'm Nikki Robner, and I live in the city of Richmond.
Good morning. My name is William H. Ferguson, and I am from Tidewater, Virginia.
I'm Richard Langford, the chair of the board, and I'm from Blacksburg.
I'm Ignacia Moreno, and I'm from the same Virginia.
Thank you. We do now have a quorum. There are 3 members of the board not joining us today. Mr. Hoagland, who has a conflict of interest in the action before the board, and 2 newly sworn-in members of the board, Ms. Kapoor and Ms. Bush. Also on stage today is David Taylor, Director of Environmental Quality, and the board's legal counsel, Matthew Gooch, Assistant Attorney General. The only item on today's agenda is the minor new source review permit for Atlantic Coast Pipeline, LLC, Buckingham Compressor Station, registration number 21599. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that at the board on November 8th and 9th, the board received a detailed presentation from DEQ staff on the development and technical aspects of a draft permit. The public comments that were received during the public comment period that ran from August 8th to September 21, the agency's response to those comments, and staff amendments to the draft minor new source review permit. In addition, the board heard comments directly from 80 members of the public who had previously commented, and also a brief presentation from the applicant. After the presentations and public comment, the board discussed the draft permit and asked numerous questions of staff, but deferred any action on the draft permit until a meeting on December 19th, 2018. At the December meeting, the board received presentations from staff, including possible amendments to the permit, and the board approved certain amendments to the permit, to the draft permit. The board did not approve issuance of the permit at that meeting. The board did direct that documents received by the board between the November and December meetings be subject to a minimum public comment period. That public comment period has been concluded, and the board is meeting today to continue deliberations on the draft permit. There is no opportunity for public comment at today's meeting. The process established in the board's regulation for receiving public input on the draft permit was completed at the November meeting. And I'll say that again, we've had a lot of comment, both in the public comment periods, written comments, as well as the oral comments that we took in November, as well as the public hearing we did in the Buckingham area. The statutory and regulatory opportunity for public comment on a draft permit at a board meeting is to allow the public, in other words, the reason why you have public comment at the board meeting is to allow the public the opportunity to respond to any summary of comments that provided by the department to the board. Because in most comment periods, all those comments go to the department prepares a summary of them, to tell us what the summary was and what their response is. And that the public discussion after that is to make sure that the people who submitted comments got their comments heard directly by the board, and that's already occurred. In order to expedite the process, public comments received during this recent minimum public comment period have been handled differently. They've been sent directly to each of the members for review. So the DEQ didn't do any summary. Be assured that we got all the comments. I can address that later. But I got a ton of comments. Every comment that got into my inbox during that comment period, I actually personally looked at and read. So in this case, your comments have been seen by members of the board. So there's been no summary of the comments provided by the department today. And since there's no summary of comments, there's no reason for the public to try to comment on their comments because we've seen them directly. And that's why there's no public opportunity for comment at this meeting. Staff will make a brief presentation today on the draft permit and will be advising the board of activities that have occurred since our last meeting. And before that, there's some sort of housekeeping things. I mentioned before the meeting started, I'll say it again, we're here at a public venue that is at the good host of the people at DoubleTree by Hilton to allow us to meet here. But there are other meetings going on in the same venue, so there's more stringent. There'll be more stringent rules today for the conduct of the meeting because we just can't interrupt what's going on in this place of business. So, conduct that interferes with an orderly and efficient board meeting or interferes with staff presentation or board discussions is prohibited and will result in your removal from the meeting. As I mentioned, another organization is having a meeting next door, and conduct that interferes with that will result in removal from this meeting and perhaps even from the grounds. We've had several times we've had public meetings, and we have had, I'll call them outbursts and demonstrations in the past. And at times we've also had the security presence available. Today I've been advised that we're going to need to be tighter on that. So we'll have
We're not doing the cop shop for it.
We'll have to do essentially a zero tolerance policy on any outbursts or comments, and I will, aside from that one I just heard, if that occurs, we will ask the police to escort that person out of the room because we got to maintain order in here. Okay. So the rules have been posted, copies of those are around, and they were at the table out front. You probably already know, they're prohibiting possession or use of noise-making devices, clapping or shouting, and shouting out, and those apply even when the meeting is in recess. Sorry for having to do that, but we are in a different venue than we usually are, and we need to maintain the dignity here. Now I will call on Mr. Dow for a presentation, short presentation, I've been assured, on what's going on.
That working? It is.
Sit down.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. I am Michael Dow, Director of the Air and Renewable Energy Division for DEQ. I'm appearing before the board today to present the DEQ staff's recommendation concerning the proposed permit for the Buckingham County Compressor Station. To provide a brief background, the Buckingham Compressor Station is one of 3 compressor stations planned for the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. It is the only Atlantic Coast Pipeline compressor station in Virginia and will be the most stringently regulated of the 3. The proposed compressor station is a minor stationary source under Virginia's air permit regulations, but for all intents and purposes, DEQ treated it as a major source in the permit process to better assure the protection of human health. Protection of public health and the environment are DEQ's most important goals. All Virginia air permits require both state-of-the-art pollution control and assurance the source will not cause any violation of EPA's health-based National Ambient Air Quality Standards or Virginia State Air Toxic Standards. The state-of-the-art pollution control all permitted sources must meet is known as best available control technology. DEQ conducted a thorough best available control technology review for the Buckingham Compressor Station. The emission limits in the proposed permit are the lowest for any natural gas compressor turbines in the country. Selective catalytic reduction will be used to control NOx emissions from the turbines down to 3.75 parts per million by dry volume at 15% oxygen on a 3-hour average. In addition, the proposed permit has the tightest limits on the venting of natural gas found at any compressor station in the United States. And an innovative vent gas recirculation system will be used to control VOC and methane emissions. The proposed permit will set a very tough and rigorous national standard that future compressor stations will have to meet across the country. Next slide. In addition to the application of best available control technology, all air permits must assure the source will not cause any violation of health-based air quality standards. In this case, computer modeling was done using the worst-case scenario for each pollutant. The air modeling shows that emissions from the Buckingham compressor station will not cause an exceedance of any national ambient air quality standard and will not violate any Virginia state air toxic standards for formaldehyde and hexane. The bottom line is here that the Buckingham compressor station will be the most stringently regulated compressor station in the country and that the public's health will be protected. The proposed compressor station permit underwent a public comment period that ran from August 8th until September 21st. Over 5,300 written comments were received. In addition, a public hearing was held on the proposed permit in Buckingham County, which 191 people attended, and at which 60 individuals provided oral comments. At the board's meeting on November 8th, the board received additional oral comment from members of the public who had previously provided written comments during the public comment period. At the meeting on November 9th, DEQ staff gave a presentation on the proposed permit, as well as a summary in response to the comments that were received during the public comment period. Dominion gave a presentation as well. However, the board on November 9th deferred a decision on the proposed compressor station permit pending receipt of additional information the board asked DEQ to provide regarding site suitability and demographics. DEQ provided the information requested by the board prior to the board's next meeting on December 19th. In addition, before the December 19th meeting, DEQ staff drafted several amendments to the proposed permit at the request of certain board members that were based on public comment, Dominion's presentation at the November meeting, discussions between DEQ and individual board members, and discussions between DEQ and Dominion. All of those amendments serve to make the permit more stringent than that proposed by staff. They included new provisions to require the installation and operation of continuous emission monitors on the turbines to measure emissions of nitrogen oxides. They also included provisions requiring monitoring of volatile organic compounds and carbon monoxide to help assure ongoing compliance with the permit's emission limits. And finally, the new provisions require ambient monitoring for nitrogen dioxide, PM 2.5, and volatile organic compounds to help assure the compressor station's emissions do not violate the national ambient air quality standards. DEQ worked with Dominion to assure the accuracy of the language and has obtained Dominion's concurrence that that amended language was acceptable. And while those amendments prepared by DEQ staff for the December 19th meeting are not officially part of the DEQ staff recommendation, DEQ does not object to any of those changes. At the December 19th meeting, DEQ staff gave a presentation on site suitability and environmental justice issues, which encompassed a discussion of the material on site suitability and demographics that was provided to the board by DEQ prior to that meeting. And at this point, I'd just like to reiterate a point I made at the December 19th meeting. DEQ focuses on risk. Regardless of the demographics of the area surrounding the compressor station, the compressor station will not cause a disproportionate adverse impact to the community for two reasons. First, the residents of the area surrounding the compressor station are already breathing air that is cleaner than the air breathed by 90% of the residents of Virginia. Second, although our air modeling does indicate that the compressor station will cause a slight increase in air pollution concentration, the increase is slight, and model concentration of air pollution after the compressor station starts operation will remain well below air quality standards. The residents of the area will continue to breathe air much cleaner than that breathed by the vast majority of Virginia residents. Now, getting back to the December 19th meeting, DEQ also.
For those people who have cough problems, please go out into the hallway until you're able to participate without disrupting the process.
Again, at the December 19th meeting, staff also presented to the board the amendments to the proposed permit that I referred to earlier. On December 19th, the board voted to revise the proposed permit to include the amendments presented by DEQ staff. But the board again deferred taking final action on the proposed permit pending completion of another public comment period. The public comment period was to be minimum in time and limited in scope to the documents concerning demographics and site suitability that were provided to the board prior to the December 19th meeting. The public comment period commenced on December 21st and concluded on January 4th. Okay. I will now move to staff recommendations. The staff recommends that based on 1, the board book material that contains a memorandum to the board, a clean copy of the draft permit, a track change copy of the draft final permit, the permit engineering analysis, the air quality analysis review, a list of commenters and a sampling of all written comments received, and a summary of and response to public comments. 2, the public comments made available to the board. 3, the agency files on the draft permit, including the application for a permit. 4, public comments made at the board meeting. 5, staff presentations. 6, the additional documents and public comments submitted to the board on the documents from December 21, 2018 through January 4th, 2019. And 7, board discussions and based on consideration of the reasonableness of the activity involved and the regulations proposed to control it pursuant to Virginia Code Section 10.1-1307E. First, the board find that A, the permit has been prepared in conformance with all applicable statutes, regulations, and agency practices. B, the limits and conditions in the permit have been established to protect public health and the environment. And C, all public comments relevant to the permit have been considered. Second, staff recommends the board approve the permit and conditions as presented at the November 9th, 2018 meeting with the additional amendments approved by the board at the December 19th, 2018 meeting that comply with applicable laws and regulations as they further respond to public concerns and has been agreed to by the applicant. And I will add that, as I mentioned earlier, technically while the staff does not formally recommend the amendments approved by the board at the December 19th meeting, staff has no objection to their inclusion in the final permit. Third, the staff recommends that the board authorize the director to issue the permit as approved by the board. Staff further recommends that the board incorporate the above referenced memorandum, permit engineering analysis, and response to comments into its decision to approve the permit. That concludes staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Dow. There may be questions of staff. Before that, I'd like to kind of lay out the way things are going to flow. The DEQ's made their presentation. The board will have deliberations under Robert's Rules of Order, which is the way you run boards of this type. In order to have robust discussion, we need to have a motion on the floor. So there will be a motion made on the floor and seconded, and then we will discuss our various thoughts and so forth about this before actually taking the vote. But just because there's a motion made doesn't mean it's going to get passed necessarily. So that's kind of letting the public know how things are going to flow. First, I'll say, are there any questions of DEQ staff from members of the board? Yes.
Mr. Dowd, you addressed disproportionate adverse impacts on the community, and I was hoping that you might elaborate
Sure.
on the analysis that you performed to arrive at that conclusion.
Well, the analysis took a couple of different prongs. One of them is the most important aspect of it was the air quality modeling analysis that was done. There was extensive modeling, and the modeling indicates that for all the pollutants, and in particular the PM 2.5 pollutant that I know is of concern to several of the board members, that even under worst case scenarios, the model concentrations at the highest emission limits, at the highest emissions allowed under the permit, the compressor station, will result in highest concentrations of PM 2.5 well below the National Ambient Air Quality Standards for PM 2.5. Now, you couple that with the and looked at it on the EJ screen. When you look at the percentile of 2.5 risk that the EJ screen presents for the area around the Buckingham compressor station, it indicates that that area has a present, without the compressor station, the residents of the area around the area breathe air that is in the top 10% of clean air in the state for PM 2.5, meaning the residents are already breathing air that is better than 90% of the rest of the residents of Virginia. And when you couple that with our air quality modeling, which indicates that the increase in emission, an increase in ambient concentrations that will be caused by the compressor station are so marginal that the resulting concentrations are still way below the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, and the remaining air quality at that point, even with the compressor station, will still be better than that breathed by the vast majority of Virginians.
Thank you. Yes, Maria.
Sure.
More.
This is for Director Taylor. I was hoping that you could address the health assessment that we discussed in the department.
Yeah, happy to. As I mentioned at our last board meeting, the health department has agreed that they could do a letter of health consultation, which involves, it will take 2 phases. The first phase will be to take the data that we have already used in our projected analysis and run it through their computer projections. And so they would propose, and we are working with them now to do an analysis before the station is built. Should the station ever be built, then they have agreed to and would like very much to do a further analysis based on empirical monitored data to confirm that projections were what we expected them to be. So that's the path that we're on at this point.
Thank you.
Are there other questions of staff? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Dowd. Is there a motion?
Yes, I have a motion. William H. Ferguson. I move that 1, based on the board book material that contains a memorandum to the board, a clean copy of the draft permit, a track change copy of the draft final permit, the permit engineering analysis, the air quality analyses review, a list of commenters, a sampling of all written comments received, and a summary of and response to the public comments. The public comments made available to the board, the agency files on the draft permit, including the application for a permit, public comments made at the board meeting, the staff presentation, the outline of possible amendments and amended permit, the additional documents and public documents submitted to the board are the documents from December 21, 2018 through January 4, 2019, and board discussions, and based on the consideration of the reasonableness of the activity involved in the regulations proposed to control it pursuant to 10.1-1307E, the board. A, find that the permit has been prepared in conformance with all applicable statutes, regulations, and agency practices. 2, the limits and conditions in the permit have been established to protect public health and the environment. 3, all public comments relevant to the permit have been considered. B, approve the permit and conditions as presented at the November 9, 2018 meeting with additional amendments approved by the board at the December 19 meeting, 2018, that comply with applicable laws and regulations as they further respond to public concerns that have been agreed to by the applicant. And C, authorize the director to issue the permit as approved by the board. 2, incorporate the above referenced memorandum, permit engineering analysis, response to comments, and the outline of possible amendments into its decision to approve the permit. And 3, state that the additional amendments to the permit presented by staff, approved by the board at the December 19, 2018 meeting, are in compliance with applicable laws and regulations as they further respond to public concerns that have been agreed to by the applicant. 4, and finally, state that the board does not adopt any legal views experienced by DEQ regarding the board authority under Code, Virginia Code Section 10.11307E. Thank you.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, we'll now have discussion on the motion. Let me first, I'll take the chairman's prerogative here. I've served on this board for more than 16 years, actually, probably longer than most anybody else has.
Why wouldn't you want it?
That was an outburst. Can someone escort that gentleman out?
What? Leave a meeting.
I told you at the beginning what we're going to do. We've been warned.
He has to commit to these because you had the power.
Thank you. So, officer, if they're agreed to be silent coming back, they can come back in. I've spent a lot of time on this board and a lot of time on controversial permits. I've personally spent many hours looking at this permit application and this issue. I spent hours and hours looking at the most recent comments that many of you have submitted. I looked, as I said earlier, I looked at every one that was in my inbox and made a judgment about what you said and what it meant. Some commenters specifically asked that we not consider the community engagement report with the proffered money. I did not. This is not part of the draft permit for the facility, and I did not consider it. Several commenters cited Section 1307E of the state air pollution law, and that those should govern, and that we had the authority to do that. So I looked at those in some detail. I'll address them in reverse order. Number 4 is the scientific and economic practicality of reducing or eliminating the discharge resulting from such activity, which means the compressor station. As we heard today, DEQ used a best available control technology review, and they required control systems and procedures much more stringent than the other 2 compressor stations on the pipeline that are located in other states. The final draft permit has more stringent requirements than any similar compressor station anywhere in the United States. My conclusion is that this criteria was met. Number 3, the suitability of the activity, meaning the compressor station, to the area in which it is located. This has been a topic of some controversy, and in fact, I guess there's some court cases pending about parts of it. The Air Division has long had a practice that site suitability be determined by the local governing body, except as to questions involving air quality. The Buckingham County Board of Supervisors certified to the DEQ that the proposed site met the local requirements. There is a court challenge involving the Board of Supervisors' action that has not yet been resolved. But the certification by the local governing body still remains intact. Based on that, my conclusion is that this criteria is met. Number 2, the social and economic value of the activity involved. Again, the activity is the compressor station. There is economic value added to the community in the form of tax revenue. There is economic value reduced in the community from reported reduced home values and other considerations mentioned by commenters. Social value may be diminished in the local area due to possible noise or light issues. I am not qualified or have the expertise to determine the net value of those puts and takes. Those issues were, in my view, addressed in the consideration of the Buckingham County certification. My conclusion is that this criteria is met. Number 1, the character and nature of injury to or interference with safety, health, or the reasonable use of property which is caused or threatened to be caused. Commenters expressed concern about the safety of living near the compressor station. Response to the previous comments section indicate that the permittee is working with the local authorities to address those safety concerns. I spend a lot of time regarding health issues. One key part of that depends on whether the area around the facility is considered an environmental justice community based on minority status, income, or other factors. This board requested additional information on the demographics of the area, which is in part with the last comment period that was also dealt with. And we received comments and analysis of demographic methodology on both sides of this issue. For purpose of my review, I have assumed that it may be an EJ community, or even if it's not, the community closest to the compressor station has an EJ characteristic, or what sometimes EPA refers to as a hotspot, or a smaller concentrated of minority population that might be affected. So, I am simplifying things, but okay, so if it's an EJ issue, what does that mean? There generally are 2 elements to consider. First, inclusion of the EJ community in the process, and second, avoiding disproportionate impact. The inclusion of the EJ community, I admit the authorities, various authorities, were late in identifying potential EJ issues. The record, I think, is fairly clear on that. But certainly, during this board's consideration, issues and input from the EJ community have been robust. What about disproportionate adverse impact? Several commenters cited the Commonwealth Energy Policy in section 67-102-11. Ensure that development of new or expansion of existing energy resources or facilities does not have a disproportionate adverse impact on economically disadvantaged or minority communities. That same policy at 67-1025, just a few paragraphs above, says, ensure the availability of affordable natural gas throughout the Commonwealth by expanding Virginia's natural gas distribution and transmission pipeline. Again, what I'm reading to you is my personal assessment and view. Does not necessarily mean it's anything from anyone else. But this is the way I spent many, many hours looking at the
We
details of
spent
this.
4 years on this, dude. Honestly, we are allowing y'all to do this today. We are allowing
Officers,
you
going around.
to do this. I'll leave, don't worry, but we're allowing we're allowing you. If we want to, we will
Recess.
shut this whole meeting down.
What you hearing? Hey, as you said, you've had lots of opportunities to put all your comments in, and you got to let this process work out. It's not helpful. It's not helpful to slow it down or interfere with it. And we will stop it. Officer, there's one more that needs to relieve.
We will stop this pipeline.
We can continue removing things until the room gets. Okay. DEQ just conducted air dispersion modeling on the pollutants of most significance in their presentation. They talked about that. The fence line maximum concentrations were below the national ambient air quality standard, or the state toxic standard as applicable. Exposure to PM 2.5 is considered safe by the EPA NAAQS, that's the National Air Quality Standard, if concentrations in the ambient air are below those standards. Those standards are established in the Clean Air Act. The primary standard, which we're talking about, they're designed to protect human health with an adequate margin of safety, including sensitive populations such as children, the elderly, and individuals suffering from respiratory diseases. Many pollutants have a threshold concentration below which they have no discernible impact on the population. Particulate matter, however, does not have such a threshold, at least most of the scientific data indicates it does not. And any concentrations have some impact. Compressor station will have a potential to emit PM 2.5. The air dispersion modeling shows at the maximum operation, as Mr. Dowd was saying earlier, the concentrations of PM 2.5 at the fence line of the compressor station will increase by, I think the information shows, 20 to 40%. But that they're still 30 to 40% below the standard that was set to protect sensitive populations. I went further than that. I had some concerns about PM 2.5, so I inquired of DEQ staff about not just what were the concentrations going to be near the compressor station, but what are the concentrations near the residents that are most closely affected. And they have that data. When you do modeling, sorry, I'm an engineer, so I'll give you more information than you need, but when you do that modeling, there's a whole grid of what they call receptors that the computer calculates for all around, and several of those are right near where some of the identified homes are. So I went to look what those were. Actually a presentation, I think it was in November or December, I forget which, DEQ had made a comment that those numbers at the residences were 50 to 80% lower than at the fence line. Then what I did was I went further than that. I actually looked at the concentrations because in their environmental impact statement, FERC was also talking about potential for this. I went and looked and did some research on papers, that is publications, from various sources. The Cleveland Clinic Journal of Medicine comments that while poor outdoor air quality has not been clearly linked to incidence of asthma, the ambient pollutants such as particulate matter and diesel exhaust, outdoor air quality is worse in urban environments where greater proportions of people of low socioeconomic status live. That's irrelevant. The PM has been an issue across the state. We monitor for all over the state in continuous monitors. It's worse in urban areas. The background particulate matter basically in Buckingham County and the area around is about 15 micrograms per cubic meter. If we do the modeling at what the impact of the compressor station is and look out at the closest homes, there is an increase predicted of about 1 microgram per cubic meter based on one of the standards. That's still way, way below the air quality standard, which is set at 35. And it is still, as Mr. Dowd said, equates to some of the cleanest air, continues to be some of the cleanest air in Virginia.
Continue that way.
Okay, you can have a difference of opinion, but that's what's been stated, and that's what actually the data shows.
Missing the point.
Numerous studies have linked PM 2.5 to many health problems, from increased asthma to hospital visits. A study from the Journal of American Medical Association found that for every 10 microgram per cubic meter increase in daily PM 2.5 exposure over the course of a whole summer, the mortality rate didn't change much. It was slightly more than 1% increase, even when the levels were still within the 35 milligrams per day limit. Now, that's an increase of 10 that made around 1% increase in impacts on health. We're talking about 1 microgram or 1/10 of that, and so it's much lower than what the Harvard folks found in their study.
Put it in your backyard.
In EPA's guidance on
Your backyard.
officer, I need some more help. In EPA's guidance on disproportionate impact, they say that in light of the various facts, it is the decision maker that has to make a judgment. That's out of their technical guidance for assessing environmental justice and regulatory actions. So it's up to the decision maker to determine how important these facts are. And I conclude that there is a low probability of a disproportionate adverse impact to a hotspot on local residents.
Put it in your backyard.
You live there yourself.
Right.
Just say put it in your
Actually, my backyard has higher levels already than that. So, because I live in Montgomery County and there's a big highway next to it. Okay, that's my comment or discussion. Do any other board members have anything they want to say or add, questions?
Thank you for coming. Top-level military, business, port, shipbuilding, seafood, and elected officials realize that coastal Virginia, which has a population of over 2 million, and is Virginia's industrial and maritime breadbasket, does not have the natural gas infrastructure required to accommodate the areas.
If you keep building pipelines, you're not going to have land to live on. Global warming.
Officer.
You all are old. You know we are going to be around a little bit longer, and this is not your decision to make. I am a part of Jonesville, and
Hampton Roads is so short of natural gas capacity that Virginia Natural Gas cannot offer guaranteed service to a new large customer anywhere east of Williamsburg, Virginia. Last year, due to cold weather, our businesses had their service curtailed and had to shut down, sending workers home as there was not enough pipeline capacity to serve demand. We're now paying over $100 million more for natural gas this winter than we would have if the pipeline had been in service, $100 million. Adjacent rural counties that have been left out of the now booming economy have not had the natural resources to attract new businesses, seeing its population either go on public assistance or move away. Rural residents are subjected to burning truckloads of firewood in their wood stoves. Farmers need affordable natural gas for silage, feedlots to dry and store crops. Natural gas is a direct replacement for diesel, coal-fired facilities, wood-fired stoves, and undependable solar and wind-driven plants.
It's not your job, pal. We don't like it. Do not touch it. Do not touch it. You leave it.
Thank you.
You go live next to it, pal.
In my hometown, mountains of coal. In my hometown, mountains of coal create a filthy environment and health problems for low-income neighborhoods. Natural gas provides an alternative to coal.
Unnatural gas.
While solar fields are wonderful for chopping off the energy spikes in the summer months, solar simply cannot work in a cloud cover and take hundreds of thousands of acres of fertile farmland and forests out of production. Replacing just one modern gas generating plant with solar panels would require the same acreage as the entire Washington, D.C. MSA. A project of this type must work its way through dozens of layers of regulators, local, state, and federal to garner support for the project.
Or get paid by the minute.
Thank you. A local engineering department reviews it whereupon it must satisfy their specific requirements. It then must go to a local planning staff, completely engineered at a cost of millions. The project then needs to go to a planning commission made up of volunteers from the community. Then it goes to an elected, democratically elected board of supervisors who can send it back for revisions for whatever reason, noise, landscaping, land use, etc. This pump station passed unopposed by every local democratically elected official, including Louise Lucas, Buckingham County's state senator. Ms. Lucas is an active member of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, elected vice chair of outreach within the Democratic Party of Virginia, Golden Heritage member and past president of the NAACP, and charter member of the Martin Luther King Leadership Steering Committee.
She's wrong too.
To suggest that these local citizens are affected only strictly by campaign funds is not realistic or factual. My point is this. Thank you. My point is this. There's a proven need for the pipeline, and it is a very serious matter. Thank you.
Responsibility to the earth and the community and to your residents and to the taxes. You have a responsibility to all of it.
You don't need to touch that. Don't touch that.
You have a responsibility to all of it.
Do not touch that.
serious matter. Thank you.
Oh my God! Put it yourself and make the right decision.
Thank you. This is a very serious matter for the families in coastal and south side Virginia. The applicant has revised his plan to address the concerns of the staffs and elected officials at every level. With a full directive from the governors who appointed us.
Full directive from Dominion Power.
Officer,
And the compressor station developers have sufficient financial backing which offsets any liabilities that could possibly occur.
Yeah, right.
The facility will provide an alternate source of energy when older interstate pipelines need repair and replacement. The facility will create millions of dollars in taxes and thousands of jobs to these south side rural counties that have traditionally been left behind. Thank you. The facility will also help ensure that the military bases in Southeast Virginia meet stringent regulations when future rounds of budget cuts and base realignment and closings are implemented. It will assist in the development of thousands of high-paying tech jobs and new infrastructure needed for the new.
The jobs go to people from out of state.
officer,
Thank you. It will assist in the development of thousands of high-paying tech jobs.
Don't eat the sheep. Don't eat the earth. It is sacred. The people are sacred.
Thank you. Thousands of high-paying tech jobs and new infrastructure needed for the new undersea fiber optic network coming to Virginia Beach from Africa, Europe, and South America. This will ensure that our port, which is being expanded to match the ports in South Carolina and Georgia, will have the capacity to expand with new industrial warehousing and assembly plants. Therefore, wrapping the baby up, it is our directive and obligation to approve the pump station if it's lawful and exceeds all safety codes.
Not lawful.
Thank you. The region needs the energy. The state needs the energy.
No, we don't.
And for these reasons and many more, I support this project without reservation.
Shame! Tell Dominion to put 2,000 megawatts of offshore wind, renewable energy. This is not the answer.
Renewable.
Let's go. Shame!
thank you. Let's not do that again, or we'll recess and leave and you can yell at yourselves. We have to maintain order. And you're done. Is there anyone else who'd like to comment? Ms. Moreno?
I would like to thank members of the public for your engagement, vigor, and the trust that you have placed in this board.
You betrayed it.
I have seen it, I have seen you, I have heard you. I have taken a careful look and have worked with DEQ to ensure that the permit requirements are stringent, protective of human health and the environment, enforceable, and that DEQ's oversight is real. I have considered the data on both sides and have assumed that the community at issue is an environmental justice community. I have requested and considered an analysis on whether there may be any disproportionate adverse impacts on the affected community. In addition, I have requested a health assessment, and Mr. Paler has worked with the Department of Health to ensure that health assessment is conducted and that it starts right away. I also visited the site to see it for myself and to put into context what you told me in your comments. And I have considered all of your comments on all issues, including site suitability. I do not agree with DEQ's views on the scope of the board's authority under Virginia Code Section 10.1-1307E. In my view, the board has broad authority and discretion under the statutory provisions enacted by the General Assembly. Having said that, the board's authority is not without limitations. For example, the merits of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline are not before the board. This is not to understate the significance of the matter before the board, but simply to provide a context for the decision that we are tasked with making today. The matter before us is whether to approve a minor stationary source air permit for the proposed Buckingham compressor station. I will limit my comments to that in the interest of time, but I would like to conclude my remarks by acknowledging the significant contributions made by Sam Bleacher and Rebecca Rubin to the work of the State Air Pollution Control Board. And once again, I thank you.
Did you read her op-ed?
No other comments? We'll call a question. Ms. Byrd, would you please call the roll? You want a roll call? I think we probably need one.
Ms. Marino?
Yes.
Ms. Ferguson?
Yes.
Ms. Rogner?
Yes.
Mr. Langford?
Yes.
Protect our children! Protect our children! Protect our children!
Motion
Protect our children! 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 Protect our children!
Okay, we were here today to hear the State Air Pollution Control Board decide whether to grant a permit to the Buckingham Compressor Station on ACP. An unfortunate result is, well, unfortunately the result was that the board approved that permit unanimously. That's a real disappointment because it's clear to me and to many others that this proposal doesn't meet the legal requirements. I think that the discussion from the board members, in fact, bolsters that argument instead of refute it. The idea that there's not a disproportionate impact here has certainly not been proven. In fact, the evidence that we have says that there will be, and the health assessment that they now promise will be done certainly should have been done before a permit decision was made, so that disproportionate impact could be truly assessed. So I believe that the Air Board members made a decision that's not reasonable or rational and not in accordance with the law.
What type of effect will this have?
I'm sorry?
What type of effect will it have?
Well, at this point, it's not going to have any effect on the finishing of ACP because they're not allowed to construct the pipeline at this point anyhow. That's because pretty much every time the courts have looked at the issues here, they've said that the agencies didn't do a thorough and an accurate job, which is what we saw here today. So the fact that pretty much every agency so far in their own processes have failed us, I guess was just a lead into the Air Board doing the same thing. But it's not going to lead to what Dominion wants, which is completion of this pipeline anytime soon. And I don't believe it's going to allow them to build this pipeline.